Did you know that British motorcyclists in the 1960s and 1970s didn't just ride fast? They established a whole culture around it. This time was full of shocks, like rockers in leather jackets tearing down highways and church-run clubs that let felons in. This list of 15 things you didn't know about British motorbike culture in the 1960s and 1970s includes secret tales, forgotten fights, and global legacies. What started as a rebellious hobby outside of a few greasy spoon eateries in London grew into a style that is now known all over the world. The café racers' bare frames, low bars, and single seats were never supposed to be stylish, yet the look spread well beyond Britain's borders. People in Europe, America, and later Asia started to copy the style, creating a global subculture. By the end of the 1970s, the British bike industry was struggling, but the style had already become its own thing. Triumphs, BSAs, and Nortons that were sent to other countries became quite valuable there. Manufacturers in other countries began making bikes that looked like British ones. The trend moved from mechanics in back alleys to magazines and custom exhibits, which helped it stay alive. Modern revivals show how long the cafe racer persona has lasted. Rebuilt classics sit next to new machines that pay tribute to the time period. Gatherings at venues like the Ace Cafe indicate that the spirit never really left. It's tempting to image the biker world of the 1960s as one that was only full of young males. But ladies were always there. Women had a subtle but vital role, from girlfriends riding pillion to independent riders owning their own bikes. Their presence in cafes, bars, and runs along the beach provided a new level to popular history that is often missed. Barl Swain was one of the most famous people. In 1962, she became the first woman to race alone in the Isle of Male TT. Even though the racing authorities eventually took away her license, her success indicated that women could and wanted to be a part of the motorcycling industry. Many nameless women customized bikes, rode together, and shared the rocker identity outside of racing. Their stories didn't make the news very often, but they were active and well known in their own culture. As restorations and films look back at the rocker era, more and more people are recognizing female riders, showing that the culture was never as one-sided as it seemed. In the 1960s, if you walked into a garage in Britain, you would often see teenage riders bent over their bikes with wrenches in their hands. Most people didn't buy ready-made cafe racers, they built them themselves. Riders got rid of extra weight, tweaked engines for speed, and looked for parts wherever they could. This do-it-yourself attitude was both necessary and creative. Most people couldn't buy brand new motorcycles, so the only way to keep a bike operating was to learn how to fix it. Some people changed their petrol tanks, others tried out different gears, and many changed their seats and handlebars to get that racing stance. The shed and the side street became places where people might come up with new ideas. The do-it-yourself method made people feel proud and like they belonged more than anything else. Each machine was different because of the people who developed it. Britain's custom scene is a direct descendant of the riders who first dared to take apart factory-built perfection. The culture of mechanical self-reliance lives on in this movement today. There is no subculture that stays quiet. And for British motorcyclists in the 1960s, the music was just as loud as the motors. Jukeboxes in wayside cafes played rock and roll music, and bands like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones provided young people a voice of rebellion. The places where people met were marked by leather jackets, coffee mugs, and music. The movies added to the myth. Movies like The Wild One set the tone for how people should look, while British movies like The Leather Boys showed a more realistic side of life in the rocker scene. People who rode bikes started to see themselves on the big screen, which only made their identity stronger and their connection to music culture stronger. Magazines also helped by sharing both style and tales. Movies, music, and books made motorcycle riding more than just a way to get about. They helped create a shared culture that connected thousands of teenage riders through sound and image, from the beaches of Brighton to the cafes of London. TT, the Isle of Man, was known to every motorcycle in Britain in the 1960s and 1970s. It was more than just a race. It was a rite of passage, and a test of daring and talent that assessed speed in miles per hour. The TT had a mythological feel to it because of the tiny roads, stone walls, and how fast it was. For a lot of riders, watching the race was just as crucial as watching football. Magazines, newsreels, and word of mouth spread the story of hero successes from the island to the mainland. People who raced cafe racers and bragged about how fast they were often got their ideas from the crazy things they saw at the TT. The event changed the hopes and dreams of a whole generation of bikers. People who had never been to the island nonetheless told stories about it. It stood for danger, independence, and the ultimate test of rider and machine. It left a stamp on British motorcycling culture that is still there today. By the early 1970s, the motorbike business in Britain was in big difficulties. BSA, Norton, and Triumph were once great names that commanded the roads, but suddenly they were having trouble keeping up. There were a lot of reasons, and none of them could be disregarded. Labor strikes and bad management decisions hurt factories, which slowed down output and made it harder to come up with new ideas. At the same time, Japanese brands like Honda and Yamaha were making bikes that were quicker, more reliable, and sometimes cheaper. People who used to swear by British bikes started looking for other options, and exports decreased. The decline was a sad part of Britain's industrial history. Even while some models stayed popular, the industry lost its place as the world's leader practically overnight. But out of this decline arose nostalgia and pride, which made people want to keep the memory of British bikes alive by restoring and reviving them. After the war, a new type of teenager came about in Britain, and motorcycles were a big part of their freedom. For a lot of working-class kids, vehicles were too expensive, but a motorcycle, even a used one, was within their reach. Having one meant freedom, adventure, and respect from friends. Things got even easier with higher buy plans and more consumer credit. A teenager could buy a BSA or Triumph and start working on it in the shed with just a few pounds a week. It wasn't just getting around. It was a way of saying that they were part of a different generation and were no longer limited by their parents. This low price made motorcycle riding a culture for young people. The sound of vehicles roaring down the street was as much about who you were as it was about getting somewhere. Cheap bikes led to the café racer movement and the birth of the ton-up lads, who would soon rule Britain's roadways. If you enter the world of the café racer, you'll find a culture based on making things your own. Riders didn't want to leave their bikes in the same condition as when they bought them. They needed something that was faster, thinner, and could attain the magical 100 mph on a length of road. Most of the changes were very clever. The seats were made shorter, the gas tanks were switched, and the handlebars that clip on made the riding posture lower. They took out weight and adjusted the engines for performance instead of comfort. Every choice was based on speed and style, which made regular motorcycles into racing-style street machines. These changes made the car stand out more than just fixing it up. It was easy to tell that the café racer was a café racer by its sound and shape. The hands and decisions of the people who rode each bike revealed a tale. Prideful claim that manufacturing limits could always be pushed a bit beyond. There are many stories about the Isle of Man TT, but one stands out. Barl Swain was the first woman to ride alone in the race in 1962, an achievement that shocked both fans and officials. She was a symbol of determination in a sport that was mostly male, because she was brave on those dangerous routes. Her ride went well, but it didn't cause a lot of women to sign up. Instead, the regulatory authority took away her international license soon after, saying it was for safety reasons. A lot of people thought it was a way to keep women out of the sport. For many years after that, no other women were allowed to follow in her footsteps. Even if this was an undeserved defeat, Barl Swain's name lingered on. Her tale is still an inspiration since it showed that women could participate at the highest level of motorcycle racing. People now talk about her ride as a brave and defiant moment in the history of the TT. The 1960s were a great time for British racing, but they were also a bad time. British bikes could still win trophies on the track, and famous riders made Triumphs and Nortons seem good. The Isle of Man TT and other races helped keep Britain's racing image alive, but there were problems behind the glitz. Japanese competitors were making race bikes that were quicker and more dependable, and British producers were having a hard time keeping up. There was still a lot of engineering genius, but new ideas came too slowly, and the gap got bigger every year. This difference marked the time. Britain was happy about its past wins, but it was also sad to see its racing future slip away. The bittersweet mix of success and failure created a lasting effect, reminding people how close the country came to keeping its power, but ultimately failing to change in time. It might seem strange that a church hall would become a big part of motorcycle culture, but that's what occurred in East London. Reverend John Oates started the 59 Club in 1959, and Reverend Bill Shergold later led it. What began as an initiative for young people quickly drew in motorcyclists who wanted to be part of something. Shergold is famous for riding to the Ace Café in his collar to ask musicians to join. The club didn't send motorcyclists away. Instead, they embraced them with open arms and gave them a place to hang out, have events, and even get spiritual support. Membership grew quickly, and soon the 59 Club was one of the biggest motorcycle clubs in the world. It showed that riding motorcycles might be more than just a way to protest. It could also be a way to connect with others. By connecting the church and the street, the 59 Club let teenage riders feel like they belonged without taking away who they were. It lives on as a sign of openness in motorcycle culture. In the 1960s, seaside communities saw a lot of fights that would define the time. Rockers on motorbikes and mods in suits and riding scooters fought each other. The most famous of these fights happened in Brighton, Margate, and Clacton, and they caused a national commotion. The truth was often less exciting than what the headlines said. There were fights and vandalism, but media made them sound like big wars, which made people in Britain feel scared. Politicians and media warned of a young crisis, and sociologists later called it a classic moral panic. For the riders, it was part rivalry and half show. But those days made the modern rockers' identities stick in people's minds. The picture of two youth tribes fighting on the beaches is still one of the most famous images of Britain in the 1960s. When you think of a British rocker, you probably think of black leather, big boots, and hair that is slicked back. This style wasn't only about clothes. It came about because it was needed. Riders were shielded from chilly winds and scrapes by leather, and robust boots made long rides easier. But movies and music gave the style its famous edge.
The wild one with Marlon Brando and British rock and roll bands made the useful look good. The leather jacket quickly became more than just an item of clothing. It became a sign of identity that people wore proudly in cafes and on the streets of the city. The picture stuck, and it still represents the essence of rock today. The leather-clad insurrection outfit made motorcyclists easy to spot and turned them into icons of danger and independence. What began as a basic way to safeguard things turned into one of the most powerful visual legacies of the whole movement. Long before nightclubs were a big part of young culture, the sound of motors and jukebox music filled transit cafes. The Ace Cafe on London's North Circular was one of the most important. Open all the time and full of life. It was more than just a pit stop for teenage bikers. It was a place for speed, music, and friendship. Riders came together to show off their bikes, race to the next roundabout, and get back before the jukebox song ended. The cafe racer was made to be fast over short distances to meet these challenges. The atmosphere was exciting, with both community and competition. The Ace became famous, yet it was just one of several cafes like it throughout Britain. They built a network of biker havens where they could be safe from judgment and enjoy the sounds of laughing engines and rock and roll. They are still very important to the memories of the rocker age. The Ton-Up Boys were at the center of motorcycle culture in the 1960s. They were named after their love of going 100 miles per hour. This aim, which was simply called the Ton, became the standard for a real rider. Anyone who made it there might talk about it and get admiration from their peers. To get this fast, bikes were taken apart, tweaked, and changed, which led to the cafe racer look. Even when they weren't moving, the machines appeared rough, vicious, and swift. Riders bent low, tore down the tarmac, and went back to cafes with their heads held high, proud of how fast they had gotten their motorcycles to go. This search for the Ton was about a lot more than just how fast you could go. It stood for defiance, independence, and the excitement of life on the edge. The Ton-Up Boys were the first to create a whole subculture that still affects motorcycle riders all over the world today. That's all for our tour into the secret side of British motorcycle culture in the 1960s and 1970s. If any of these stories made you think of the sound of old engines, late night stops at cafes, or memories your parents might have told you, then like the video and subscribe for more excursions down memory lane. Until next time.